The CBO also says that federal debt will be $52 trillion by 2033. At what point do you talk more firmly with lawmakers about fiscal responsibility? Because I'm assuming monetary policy cannot handle alone the inflation or keep that inflation in check with the higher level spending.
I don't do that. That's really not my job. I will say, and many of my predecessors have said, that we're on an unsustainable fiscal path, and that needs to be addressed over time. But I think trying to get into that with lawmakers would be kind of inappropriate, given our independence and our need to stick to our knitting.
Stick to our knitting. I mean, what a bunch of nonsense.
Well, hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics, and quite excited today as we have a returning guest to the show. Although I think it might be almost 2 years, although someone who is well known in the metals community and does a lot of research into some of the less than ideal things that go on in government and other circles, as well as the metals. And of course, that someone is Sean from SGT Report. So Sean, it's great to have you back here. It's been too long, but I can't even imagine what we'll dig into today, because a lot has happened in these past year and a half, 2 years. And either case, how are you doing today, my friend? Great to hear your voice.
Hey, brother, I'm doing well. Thanks for inviting me on. And you look tan. You've been getting outside, huh? Getting some fresh air, some sun, vitamin D?
Well, I've been pretty consistent, getting my early morning walk and trying to stay healthy, and which, as I think we can dig into today, obviously being physically healthy is important. Sometimes the news that comes out makes it a little bit challenging on the mindset, yet we will dig into these things and also try and find some positives. And but yes, and to start, let us first take a look at, I think you knew I was going to ask you this, but we have a silver price over $30. And on your channel at the SGT Report, you talk with a lot of people in the metals space. I'm pretty sure you and I have talked about this in the past couple of years, where everyone wondered what happens once silver gets to 30. Shot through 30 to 32 pretty quickly, sold off a little bit last week, but then on Memorial Day, we had a rally, and I think it's overall incredibly encouraging that we didn't go through 30 and then back down to 26 a couple of days later. And now here we are as of Tuesday afternoon at 32.20. But why don't I stop there, and you can share any of your thoughts on what you've seen over the past couple of months.
Well, I'm seeing the same thing as you, and I don't have any intel to bring to the table that you probably don't have yourself. But I interviewed David Jensen recently, and he's probably one of the analysts I trust the most. And he cites the demand coming out of India, and he cites the demand coming out of China. China specifically for gold. They're hoarding gold, and they never export a single ounce. And they're probably one of the biggest miners of gold on planet Earth. It's just really interesting, man, because we've been at this a long time, and everybody got really excited back in like 2010, 11, when Jeffrey Christian at CPM Group let it slip, where he said silver is like any other financial asset on Wall Street, and it trades 100 to 1 the underlying physical, as if that was no big deal. So he was talking about the paper silver, the phantom silver back then. I think now it's probably 200-300 ounces of paper silver for every 1 ounce of physical. Meanwhile, the COMEX is being drained. David Jensen and I talked about that. And I think the writing is finally on the wall, because the demand for physical is insatiable around the planet. Mexico basically doesn't want to export any more silver with these suppressed prices. And I think the chickens are coming home to roost for JP Morgan and Bank of America and whoever holds these shorts, these derivatives. Because as I do, Vic Swear recounts this often, on some days, Chris, the Wall Street bankers will sell 1 billion ounces or more of paper silver into the market in a day to kneecap the price. And just so the audience remembers, on planet Earth, throughout an entire year, there's only 700 to 800 million ounces of silver mined in physical form in an entire year. So I think $32 silver, although it's not above 50, it should be north of 200-300 at this point. I don't think $3,200 or $32 silver is anything to do cartwheels over. It is great to see that $30 price point be pierced. And I think the writing's on the wall. I mean, I don't think they can kneecap this thing forever. I've been saying that for 10 years. I think I've just been surprised that they've been able to get away with it for this long. What say you? What do you think?
Well, I hear what you're saying, and something you mentioned in there that actually just came into my inbox about an hour or two before we got on the phone. You mentioned some of the banks that have been fined, and interestingly, JP Morgan Securities fined another 100 million for failing to survey potential spoofing and high frequency trading for 8 years. So again, Sean, I know you're well aware that spoofing was what they got fined $900 million for. Think that was back in 2020, 4 or 5 years ago now. So we've seen spoofing. We've seen a lot of a large number of ounces traded well beyond what actually exists. And when you see some of the demand for metals, particularly China with gold, India is on pace so far for, after the first 3 months, to hit a record. If that pace continued, would be a record in 2024. But I mean, you're seeing a lot of pressure on the metals, and at the same time, I'd also love to know your thoughts on what we've seen out of the BRICS, where there was a report about 2 weeks ago from Pepe Escobar, who said that they are now moving their plans for a partially gold-backed settlement currency forward. So at some point, you wonder if the pressure on all this gets too much to handle. And I think that's what we've seen, a combination of these factors over the past couple months, because this rally hasn't been because the Fed started QE or lowered interest rates. They've kept them higher for longer. And we've seen all this happening in the face of that.
Well, yeah, that's right. Meanwhile, this criminal, out of control government continues to print $1 trillion in new debt every 100 days. And by the government's own accounting standards, I'll play a clip here. By 2033, at current rates of spending, we'll be at $52 trillion in stated national debt. Now, that's absolutely unsustainable. And Jerome Powell was asked about it. And here's what he said.
CBO projects the federal deficit to be 2.8 trillion in 10 years. The CBO also says that federal debt will be 52 trillion by 2033. At what point do you talk more firmly with lawmakers about fiscal responsibility? Because assuming monetary policy cannot handle alone the inflation or keep that inflation in check with the higher level spending.
I don't do that. That's really not my job. I will say, and many of my predecessors have said, that we're on an unsustainable fiscal path, and that needs to be addressed over time. But I think trying to get into that with lawmakers would be kind of inappropriate, given our independence and our need to stick to our knitting.
Stick to our knitting. I mean, what a bunch of nonsense. But the truth is, I guess it's not his job to educate the demon vipers. Yeah, so it's not his job to educate the demon creatures in Washington, D.C. that their spending is unsustainable. But it kind of is his job, isn't it? I mean, it'd be like a father educating a child, because these idiots in Washington, D.C. act like children. They act like this gravy train is going to go on and on forever, and it's not. And you know what's telling us it's not? Finally, gold north of 2,400 is telling us unsustainable. Bitcoin at 68,000 is telling us this is unsustainable. Every nation in the world moving away from U.S. treasuries is telling us this is unsustainable. The U.S. government strangling Japan and essentially extorting Japan to continue to hold and buy treasuries is telling us this is unsustainable. The Federal Reserve, being the buyer of last resort of treasuries in the bond market, is unsustainable. So it's all unsustainable. And look, I think anybody that doesn't hold, and we're talking about the majority of Americans, Chris, don't have $500 for a rainy day emergency. So they certainly don't have a safe full of silver and or gold. They certainly don't have 5 or 10 Bitcoin. So, I mean, we're headed right off a cliff, and Jerome Powell won't even sound the alarm to the demon creatures in Washington, D.C., but that's not his job, Chris.
Well, maybe it should be, because as you played that, it reminded me, I saw a clip of Janet Yellen where this came out last week, and she said twice, and I have a note here, something about keeping us on a fiscally sustainable course. And thinking, gee, keeping us on that, it I didn't know that we were on that. And you mentioned heading off a cliff. I've actually been writing a report where I had a quote from Jamie Dimon, who even a couple months ago said that we're headed off the cliff at 60 miles an hour. So, are they going to tell the people that? It certainly doesn't seem like that. But nonetheless, here we are, and it seems like the pressure is building. I've heard from a couple of the guests and some of the other analysts I follow, it's been interesting in the past couple of months. There seems to be a sense that we're kind of nearing the point where you can't keep pushing it down further. So I wonder if we're getting there. And Sean, another thing I would love to get your opinion on, because I know you have obviously you're digging into this. And again, another topic where you have some great interviews on your show, but on top of all of that, we're heading up to the election in a couple of months. And obviously, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of theatrics before now and then, certainly a lot of uncertainty in the markets, and curious what you're expecting there and any impact in the finances that we might see from that.
Yeah, I was thinking about this actually last night, tossing and turning a little bit. And, people ask a lot, not me, but just in general, people ask, will there even be an election? Some people think there won't be because we have a criminal government, right? And these people don't want to lose power. They're desperately seeking to retain power because they don't want this apparatus turned around on them like Ivan Raiklin, the former Green Beret, has said it will. All right. He's got a deep state hit list of people that need to be rounded up, swatted, and televised in live time, these swats, just like they did to their enemies like Roger Stone, etc. And justice will be served. So they're petrified of that. So I was thinking about this last night and I thought, you know what? The bird flu, another COVID outbreak, they're not going to get away with it. People won't fall for it. We're not going to fall for the lockdowns because what they want is more mail-in ballots. And what I was thinking about last night is if they get desperate enough and they know that that won't work, because by the way, the World Health Organization, that treaty still hasn't been approved because the nations can't agree on abdicating their sovereignty to the World Health Organization during another pandemic. Thank God. So the World Health Organization won't have that power, hopefully, even though Biden, the traitor, is willing to sign that treaty and abdicate our national sovereignty to a war criminal in Tedros in the World Health Organization, so that in the event of another pandemic, whatever they call a pandemic, it could be climate change, the World Health Organization would be able to dictate to the United States what we do in response to that, dictate lockdowns, dictate mandatory vaccines, etc. If they can't get away with that, here's what I fear. What is within the realm of possibility, and I pray to God it doesn't happen, is that the criminals who are importing all these military-aged young men by the tens of thousands, some say they're UN troops, a large portion of them are, waiting to be activated. My fear is that they could activate these troops before the election, say in the fall, causing chaos from coast to coast, and then having Biden then have the authority, quote unquote, to declare martial law and postpone elections. Okay, that is a possibility if they were to activate the hordes that he has allowed in, and in some cases flown in. The U.S. federal government has flown in to the interior of the nation more than 300,000 of these military-aged men. And if those men are activated and they start to loot and burn cities, and then we have a kinetic warfare, I mean, think BLM, but firing rounds in the street, all bets are off, man. I mean, that's the hellscape possibility of our future. And I would have never said that 3, 4, 5 years ago. I didn't dream it was possible that we could have a banana republic commander-in-chief so wholly bought and paid for that he would do what he's doing. In fact, I don't think he's done one good thing for America or its people. Not one. I can't think of one good thing he's done.
Sean, I'm going to extrapolate here and assume that means you're not voting for Joe in 2024.
Well, no, here, you know what, man, it is funny. But the thing is that people like to, and I don't know why at this point, because obviously we need divine intervention, right? We need a great awakening, which I think is in the process of happening. I do believe this apocalypse the unveiling or the removal of the scales from our eyes is real and human consciousness is rising. I do believe that. And that scares the powers that ought not be. But the only alternative that's viable right now to the demon in chief, who has proven time and time again that he is a traitor. And by the way, 85,000 immigrant children have vanished coming over this border. They've vanished into the child sex slave trade or human slave trade under this man's watch, under the watch of Mayorkas. The only viable alternative to that is Donald J. Trump. And anybody who says Donald J. Trump is just playing along and he's part of the problem, well, I don't know what to tell you. What's the alternative? 4 more years of a traitor who will destroy this nation? Here's the thing, Chris. If we get 4 more years of this puppet in chief, that's it. That's all she wrote for the Republic. I mean, do you think I have that wrong?
It hasn't been a great first 4 years, and not my favorite thing to think about, imagining another 4. Although, Sean, one question for you. How likely do you think it is that there's a conclusion to the election when it's done versus no matter which side loses, that we have some sort of protest like we did in the last cycle?
Well, that's actually a good question because, what these demon rats want is they want to engineer a victory through counting for as long as 2 weeks after the election. Trump has talked about this. I mean, this is absolute madness. It's the type of crap you only see in a banana republic, in a third world banana republic. I mean, it's almost getting as bad as Zelensky in Ukraine, where he just suspended elections and now he is a non-elected president of the nation. Did you know that? I think a couple days ago, his official role as president-elect, the one who was elected, which I'm sure that was a stolen election, stacked, rigged game too, but he suspended the election that was to occur. So now he is a president by mandate, right?
Oh.
So a president by force. So that's where we're headed, I think. But I don't think that model is going to work because we have 50 states and the states are now asserting their rights against the criminal federal government. There was, I think, 21 or 22 states just signed a document. The AGs of these states signed a document, made it public, and put the federal government on warning and said, in the event that the World Health Organization treaty is signed, it will have no effect or authority in our state to dictate jack squat, right? So it's an idea whose time has come. We need to nullify the tyranny coming out of Washington, D.C. But here's the thing I don't get. I kind of get it, and it kind of makes me, think about rhinos, because we shouldn't just mention demon rats. We should mention rhinos, Republicans in name only, who are not shoring up their own borders in their own states, stopping this, because this invasion, and that's what it is, by illegals into our country, is destroying our country by design, and that needs to be stopped at the border, regardless of what the federal courts say, regardless of what Joe Biden and his puppets say. I mean, that's my opinion, because we are now in a state of war. War is being waged against us. It's super clear to anybody paying attention, Chris.
Yeah, and certainly one of the things that is unfortunate that's developed is we're seeing, in many ways, financial war of a variety of kinds, and seeing sanctions escalate. Russia now placing sanctions on American and European banks. So not in some ways the most ideal environment, although perhaps one that I'm gonna imagine this one makes you smile back there. I know you like to keep your private sleuth identity, although we did have the news that looks like Klaus Schwab is stepping down from the World Economic Forum, and I know he's not one of your favorites, but you keep a close eye on the things that are going on there, and curious if you have any thoughts on if there's anything deeper to that. Is the guy just tired and it's time to hang it up? I heard someone saying it seems odd that he would be departing when it seems so close to some less than ideal portions of their vision being manifested. But what have you been hearing about that?
Well, just recall, I think it was a couple, 3-4 weeks ago, we heard rumors that he had fallen super ill and may have been in intensive care in a hospital. And, the inclination was that he was dying or was ready to die, and Satan was going to call him home. So who knows? I mean, that might be a big part of this. But it's funny, too, because Melinda Gates has resigned from the Gates Foundation, right? So she woke up to the fact that her own husband was chummy with Epstein and up to some nefarious stuff. I truly believe that. I think she did not know that. And so she has been very public in her disdain for Epstein. And she said when she met him, and she met him only once, she was repulsed by him and felt the spirit of the demonic emanating from him. So that's really significant, because the Gates Foundation, Bill Gates has probably single-handedly done more damage to our nation and to our health and nations around the world than just about anyone other than maybe George Soros and the Rothschilds. And by the way, I'm pretty sure that Klaus Schwab is a Rothschild on his mother's side. So again, the world is waking up. The Great Awakening is real, man. And so these people are scared of that. And that's why the silk glove tyranny has been removed. And now they're just punching people in the face. This is like Orwellian, by force, boot stomping on a human face forever kind of tyranny. And it's only serving to wake up more people. So that's why I believe the Great Awakening is real. Now, I'm not saying we can win this battle without God. In fact, I don't think we can win this battle without God, but God definitely is on our side and Satan is on their side. So I'm not sure what's going on at the World Economic Forum, but hopefully it's a little bit like what's going on at the WHO, and entire nation states are sort of stepping back and saying, wait. Why would we sign a treaty abdicating our sovereignty to this unelected body of tyrants, right? It's part of the Great Awakening. And I think there's an argument to be made that this is not out of a feeling of benevolence necessarily from world leaders, or maybe even from corporate leaders, but maybe it's out of a sense of self-preservation. Tom Lungano talks about that a lot as it relates to JP Morgan not playing ball with the Davos elite. So I don't know if there's something more to it than that, but that alone at face value is a hopeful thing, that people realize if I go along with this and they destroy Western society, then I think, it was Elon Musk who said this, there will be nowhere to spend my billions of dollars if we let them destroy Western civilization. Okay. We'll all be slaves to the new system. So I think that's what's interesting about what we're going through right now.
Yeah, I think it's concerning a lot of people. Again, I know you dig into some heavy elements on your show and go through a lot of these things, which are rightly concerning to a lot of the people out there. And Sean, perhaps the last one I'll ask you here is that, between the WHO, the finances, gold and silver, the Fed, and all these things that are happening, I'm curious, if you went forward 5 years in time, what are some of the things that you think may have played out by then? Again, before the event that happened about 4 years ago, previous to this time, we had that event 201, which was that thing with Bill Gates and Johns Hopkins, where they were doing simulations of something that very similar, almost to the letter, appeared a couple months later. And perhaps maybe you see some more positive things happening, but 5 years from now, how do you see some of these things getting resolved that, between the geopolitical tension and several areas of the globe, really seem to be coming to a boil right now, it feels like?
Yeah, I think that Event 201 also was wargamed by the World Economic Forum. I think it was the WEF, the Gates Foundation, and Johns Hopkins. I'd have to go back to double check that, but you guys check. I'm pretty sure I'm right on that. Okay, so one of the things that I think is becoming abundantly clear, and David Jensen would disagree with me about this. He thinks Bitcoin is a trap. But since the ETFs have been approved, we're seeing hedge funds jump in head first and getting all sorts of access and exposure to the asset class, which is now $1 trillion asset class. So I don't think that genie can be put back in the bottle. And by the way, today as we're having this conversation, Similar Scientific, ticker is SMLR, they've got a $215 million market cap. Well, they just announced that they are adopting a Michael Saylor MicroStrategy style Bitcoin model, and they've acquired 581 Bitcoin valued at $40 million, right? So this $215 million market cap company, SMLR, has $40 million of that value socked away in Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin does go to 3, 4, 500,000, $1 million as some people anticipate it could or will, then that is a game changer for humanity, because the banksters, well, you know what? Maybe David Jensen's right. Maybe it's a trap. So I don't want to proselytize about Bitcoin. I just think it's very interesting to watch corporations now adopt the strategy that's been successful for MicroStrategy. And the other thing I'd say is the states will continue to assert their authority against an out of control criminal government. And that is an idea whose time has come, because the government derives its power, its authority from the consent of the government, consent of the governed, which it no longer has. I mean, to a large degree, it does not have the consent of we the people. Only the most brainwashed NPCs could possibly support Biden and his criminal administration. So I would say states' rights. I'd also say that these people pressed too hard with Event 201.
Interesting how you've mentioned the states' rights a couple of times, because we've seen a lot of states passing legislation removing sales tax on gold and silver, removing income tax on a state level on gold and silver, some of them even storing reserves on a state level in gold and silver. So hopefully some encouraging signs that there is still power that the people have. And Sean, I appreciate that you are one of the people out there who is bringing a lot of good information to light. And perhaps just in wrapping up, I'll pull it up in the background here, but maybe you could let folks who may be hearing of you for the first time, or maybe haven't watched recently and need to get back on there, about your show at the SGT Report.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it. One thing I'd say is that we've been having a little bit of an issue with the podcast. I upload the podcast via Podbean and a private server, and it gets disseminated out to all those other services. And we've been hearing reports from a few people that sometimes there's black holes in the audio podcast when they're listening via iTunes or Amazon podcasts, I guess. That's those powers that ought not be messing with the podcast, because when I upload the audio file, it's fine. It's perfect. It's intact. There's nothing wrong with it. So I don't know what's going on. I guess I would just say, for those who are having that problem, just head over to SGT Report and just click play on the video at SGT Report and just listen to it as a podcast. It'll play perfectly fine. And or visit me directly on Rumble at SGT Report, BitChute, SGT Report, CloutHub, SGT Report, or listen via Spotify or Podbean. Podbean's pretty bulletproof, I think. But yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate you got this nice looking gold chart down here that shows us heading in the right direction. So, Sean, you stay well out there, my friend, and thanks for making some time to join me. It's great to catch up with you as always. And yeah, there's some chaotic things happening in the world, but appreciate that you and others out there are doing your best to make the best out of it and find some positives. And I think somehow we'll be okay, and we'll keep going and do the best we can, right?
Yeah. Amen. Thanks, brother.